Winning a war and surviving the peace are two completely different things. Nobody warns you about that part. If you're new to Dad's Raw Revenge and missed part 1, where I used a 3-inch legal binder to completely dismantle my wife's toxic 17-year lie at her own catered birthday party, make sure to pause this video, head over to the description, and watch part 1 first. Trust me, you're going to want the full story for this next part. The birthday party was 3 weeks ago. The legal binder on the kitchen island, the 20 relatives frozen around a catered spread, Nancy's face draining of color like someone pulled a plug, 3 weeks ago. David and Marcy walking out the front door of Wyndham Crest Drive behind me, without looking back. It feels like a different lifetime. It also feels like yesterday. That's the specific cruelty of moments that change everything. They don't settle into the past cleanly. They just sit there in your chest, neither here nor there, while regular life keeps demanding your attention anyway. Regular life, right now, was a 2-bedroom apartment on Kimball Bridge Road and a box of store-brand cornflakes on the counter that nobody wanted to eat. I bought them because they were $1.47 cheaper than the ones we used to get. I stood in the cereal aisle at the Publix on Windward Parkway for 4 full minutes doing that math. That's what winning looks like, apparently. Rebecca Owens moved fast after December 14th. That's what you get when your attorney used to be the judge signing the orders. She knows exactly how the machine runs because she ran it for 12 years. The emergency hearing was scheduled the week after the birthday. I sat in a Fulton County courtroom in my municipal job blazer, the one I wear to city council presentations, and watched a judge review Rebecca's filing with the unhurried efficiency of someone who has seen every version of this story and finds the math straightforward. The income disparity, the premarital asset documentation, the custody history, every school run, every practice, every recital, every half-block drop-off I never argued about, all of it documented in Rebecca's filing with the kind of organized precision that makes opposing attorneys go quiet. The judge signed the order without drama. $2,500 a month. Automatic income shares draft directly from Nancy's account. First Friday of every month. Without her permission, without her cooperation, without any further input from Nancy Froman whatsoever. I should have felt something significant in that courtroom. Relief, maybe. Satisfaction. Something cinematic. Mostly I just thought about whether I'd left the slow cooker on. Here's what nobody puts in the victory speech. 2 teenagers came home with me that night. Real teenagers. Not the idea of teenagers. Actual 16 and 13-year-olds with complicated feelings and Instagram accounts and very specific opinions about cereal brands. David and Marcy knew the truth now. They'd heard every word in that kitchen on December 14th. The wire transfer. The deed. The 17 years of financial architecture their father had been quietly maintaining while their mother performed wealth for an audience. It rewired something in them. I saw it happen in real time. The shift in their faces when they walked out behind me, when they got in the Pilot, when we drove north on GA 400 toward an apartment they'd never seen. But here's the thing about rewiring. It doesn't happen cleanly. It happens in stages. And the first stage looked a lot less like gratitude and a lot more like grief. David stopped talking much, not the comfortable silence of the baseball drive home. A different kind. The sealed-off, processing kind. He'd come home from school, drop his bag by the door, eat whatever I made, and disappear into the room he now shared square footage with his sister, through a thin wall. Marcy was quieter in a different way, observant, measuring. She'd look around the apartment with an expression I recognized because I'd seen it on her mother's face 100 times, calculating the distance between what was and what is. I watched my daughter measure my apartment against her old bedroom, and I felt it somewhere specific in my chest that I don't have a precise word for. The Whole Foods runs were gone. The North Point Parkway grocery hauls, the $8 sparkling water in the glass bottles, the imported cheese and the $70 olive oil. Gone. I shopped at Publix now, with a list on a budget. Real math. Real choices. David's travel baseball friends noticed things. Kids always do. The gear, the brands, which parent drives which car to Saturday practice. He never said anything to me directly about it. He didn't have to. I watched my son's jaw set differently every time I pulled the Pilot into a parking lot full of Escalades and Audis and a Mercedes GLE that looked exactly like the one his mother used to drive. I sat with that. I didn't fix it. Some things you have to let sit. 3 weeks in, on a Tuesday night when the apartment was quiet and both kids were supposedly asleep, I lay on my back in the dark staring at the popcorn ceiling. Water stain in the far corner, nothing like the smooth ceilings on Wyndham Crest. And I let the question come that I'd been holding at arm's length since December 14th. Did I blow up my children's stability just to prove a point? It sat there in the dark with me. Heavy. Honest. The kind of question that doesn't have a clean answer at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday. I thought about David eating store-brand cereal with the energy of a teenager performing tolerance. I thought about Marcy measuring the apartment with her mother's eyes. I thought about the mortgage, the property taxes, the HOA fees, the health insurance, all of it for 12 years, absorbed quietly so Nancy could live like a woman with no overhead. I thought about a sandwich, and I thought, was destroying the illusion worth what it cost them? I didn't have the answer. Not that night. I got up, drank a glass of water, and went back to bed. Some ceilings don't give you anything useful. You just have to wait for morning. Morning came. Then another. Then several more. And slowly, unevenly, in the way that real things actually happen. Not dramatically, not cinematically, but in small, unremarkable moments. Something started to shift. The Marcy moment arrived first. We were unpacking the last kitchen box on a Saturday afternoon. The one that had been sitting in the corner for 2 weeks because it only had secondary stuff in it. The extra glasses and the backup dishes that weren't essential, but still needed a home. She was helping without being asked, which was new. Handing me things. Not talking. The comfortable adjacent silence of someone who is thinking about something large and hasn't found the words yet. Then a glass slipped, hit the tile, shattered. She looked at the pieces on the floor. And then Marcy, my 13-year-old daughter who had inherited her mother's composure and her grandmother Sandra's stubborn chin, burst into tears. Not about the glass. I knew immediately. A father knows. She was crying about the choir showcase in Johns Creek, the one where she told me to move back 4 rows so her friends wouldn't see me sitting too close. She was crying about every time she'd accepted her mother's framing of me as something lesser and acted accordingly. The eye rolls, the embarrassed distances, the look that said, "Please don't come over here," while I stood in the back of every room she was in and clapped louder than anyone. It was all coming out through a broken glass on a Saturday afternoon. I didn't say anything, didn't lecture, didn't offer a single word about being right or her being wrong, or the things she owed me. I got the broom. I swept up the glass. Then I put the broom against the wall and I hugged my daughter in the middle of the kitchen floor. Completely silent, completely without conditions for as long as she needed. That was enough. That was the whole thing. Sometimes that's all there is to do. David's moment came on a Saturday night 2 weeks later southbound on I-75, after a practice at the Alpharetta complex off Haynesbridge Road. Dark highway. Low radio. My gas station coffee in the cup holder going cold the way it always did. He spoke without being asked, which for a 16-year-old boy processing something large might as well be a miracle. Mom told me if I didn't look like the other rich kids, the scouts wouldn't take me seriously, he said, still looking out the window. I thought I was protecting my future dad. I didn't know. Not crying, confessing. I heard the difference. I kept my eyes on the highway. Georgia pines sliding past on both sides. Your future is built on your swing, buddy, I said, not your mother's credit card. He nodded once, looked back out the window. We drove the rest of the way home without another word. But the silence was different this time. Easier. The specific ease of two people who have found the same footing after a long time on uneven ground. I pulled into the Kimball Bridge Road parking lot and sat in the Pilot for a second after he got out. We were going to be okay. Not immediately, not cleanly, but we were going to be okay. I had no idea what was already coming toward us from Buckhead, but Nancy Froman had made some phone calls, and the woman she hired to make them back didn't do quiet, not even close. There are two kinds of people who walk into a glass and marble Buckhead high-rise. The ones who belong there, and the ones who've already won before they sit down. The summons arrived on a Thursday, not a phone call, not a text, a formal legal summons, hand-delivered to my office on Haynesbridge Road by a courier who asked for my signature with the practiced blankness of someone who does this all day and has learned not to make eye contact. I signed, took the envelope, set it on my desk next to my county water rehabilitation spreadsheet and my cold coffee. I opened it slowly. The way you open something when you already have a reasonable idea of what's inside, and you want to confirm your suspicions before you let yourself react. Nancy Froman, represented by the law offices of Kenneth Pratt and Associates, Peachtree Road, Buckhead, Georgia. Counter petition, Friday afternoon, 2 o'clock. I read the whole thing twice. Then I called Rebecca Owens. She picked up on the second ring. Kenneth Pratt, she said, before I finished telling her the firm name. Buckhead Boutique. Aggressive intake. High billing rate. Likes to open with volume. Should I be worried? I asked. A pause that lasted exactly long enough to tell me she was choosing her words. Cliff, she said, I wrote half the case law Kenneth Pratt is going to try to use against you. No, you should not be worried. But I want you in my office tomorrow morning before you walk into that building. I was there at 8 a.m. Rebecca walked me through what was coming with the calm efficiency of a surgeon explaining a procedure she has performed several hundred times. Nancy's legal team would attack on 3 fronts simultaneously: the house deed, the escrow equity, and the custody arrangement, relying on the financial pressure of prolonged litigation to make Cliff's municipal salary the deciding factor. The strategy wasn't legal strength, it was economic terror. They're betting you can't afford the fight, Rebecca said, sliding a folder across her desk. So we're going to show them very quickly that there is no fight, just a wall. She handed me a single document, told me to read the highlighted section. I read it. I looked up at her. That's airtight, I said. Like a submarine, she said. Walk in there, let them perform, and when you're ready, say exactly what we discussed. Nothing more. I drove south on GA 400 Friday afternoon in my work blazer. The municipal job won. Past the perimeter and into Buckhead, where the buildings get taller and the parking gets more expensive, and everyone in the lobby looks like they've recently been on a Forbes list or are actively trying to get on one. The high-rise off Peachtree Road was exactly what I expected. Glass exterior. Marble lobby floors that reflected the overhead lighting like a show home. A receptionist who smiled at me with the specific warmth of someone trained to make visitors feel both welcome and slightly outclassed simultaneously. She took my name, asked me to wait. I sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than my first semester of college and looked at a piece of abstract art on the wall that looked like someone had spilled something expensive, and called it intentional. I thought about the Kimball Bridge Road apartment, the store brand cornflakes, the water stain on the bedroom ceiling. Good, I thought. Stay grounded. Stay exactly who you are in this room. They led me into the conference room at 2:15. Heavy mahogany table, 8 chairs, only 4 occupied. Cold air conditioning set at the temperature of deliberate discomfort. The kind of room designed to make the other side feel like they wandered into the wrong building. Nancy was already seated. She was in full armor, dark blazer, hair perfect, posture engineered for corporate authority. The expression she wore when she wanted someone to know they were already losing before the first word was spoken. I had seen that expression across 1,000 dinner tables, and Sunday brunches, and school pickup lines. It had stopped working on me somewhere around year 12 of our marriage. Her attorney sat to her left. Kenneth Pratt in person was exactly what his firm's billing rate suggested. Mid-50s, silver-haired, a suit that fit the way suits fit when they are made specifically for one body. He had the relaxed confidence of a man who had turned other people's misery into a very comfortable life in Buckhead. He did not stand when I entered. I noticed that. I sat down across from them, set my folder on the mahogany table, and waited. Pratt opened a leather portfolio, slid a document across the table with the precise, deliberate motion of someone who has rehearsed the gesture. The counter petition landed in front of me with a thud that was slightly too theatrical to be accidental. Here we go. He opened without pleasantries. The house deed, he explained, was obtained under financial duress. Nancy had been in a vulnerable emotional state when she signed. Newly married, overwhelmed, dependent on Cliff's financial position. The signing could be characterized as coercive. They were prepared to argue it. I kept my face completely neutral. The off-market cash sale to the institutional buyer, he continued, was a deliberate and calculated act of marital asset concealment. They were demanding 50% of the escrowed equity released immediately, and they were prepared to file motions to freeze the remaining funds indefinitely pending a full forensic financial audit. Still neutral, still waiting. And finally, the sustained legal campaign. Nancy's corporate income provided resources for prolonged litigation that Cliff's municipal salary simply could not match. They were prepared to file motion after motion, continuance after continuance, for the next 3 years if necessary. The message was clear. The legal fees alone would bankrupt me before any judge rendered a final decision. Pratt closed his portfolio. Then Nancy leaned forward. The corporate voice. Full power. The one she used in boardrooms when she wanted someone to know their role. You think you won a chess match because of one birthday stunt, Cliff, She said it the way she used to say things at Sunday dinner when her mother was watching. For the audience, not the conversation. This is the real world. You can't afford the legal war I am about to bring to your doorstep. She held my gaze. Sign this amendment. Waive the child support. Give me back 50-50 custody, or I will make sure you don't have a penny left for your pension. The room was completely silent. Pratt was watching me with the patient expression of a man who had delivered this kind of presentation many times, and was accustomed to watching the other side calculate their retreat. I let the silence sit for 4 full seconds. Then I looked at Pratt. Then at Nancy. My attorney, I said, is Rebecca Owens. I let that land for exactly 1 beat. She was a family court judge in this county for 12 years. She didn't just practice in these courtrooms. She ran them. I opened my folder, slid my own document across the mahogany table. So before you finish that sentence about legal wars, I'd suggest you look at page 4 of her filing, the section on premarital asset documentation. She's very thorough. Nancy glanced at the document, looked back up at me. Do you really think, I said, she didn't anticipate Buckhead bully tactics? I leaned back in the chair. File the motion, Nancy. Let's let a judge look at your LinkedIn posts bragging about your 60-hour work weeks while I was making school lunches and driving carpools down GA 400. Let's put all of it in front of a Fulton County courtroom and see how the math lands. Pratt's posture shifted. Subtle, but I caught it. The slight adjustment of a man who has just privately recalculated the room. He looked at Nancy, then back at me. Mr. Froman, would you mind giving us just a moment? I minded not at all. He led Nancy into the hallway. The frosted glass door was heavy and expensive, and not remotely soundproof. I sat alone in the conference room, with the abstract art and the cold air conditioning, and listened to Kenneth Pratt, billing at $450 an hour, tell my wife things she did not want to hear. His voice was low, but the hallway was marble. Everything echoed. The wire transfer was documented premarital property. Clean. Uncontested. The argument about duress during the deed signing would require Nancy to testify that she was incapable of understanding a document she signed voluntarily in her own kitchen, while employed and mentally competent, a claim a Fulton County judge would find at minimum unconvincing. The off-market sale was not asset concealment. It was a legal transaction on property solely in Cliff's name. The forensic audit threat would cost Nancy as much to pursue as it would cost Cliff to defend, and it would turn up nothing actionable. And the custody history, 17 years of documented primary caregiving, school records, medical appointment records, extracurricular transportation logs, was a wall, a clean, documented, thoroughly sourced wall that their counter-petition had no mechanism to scale. And then the part that made Nancy go quiet in the hallway. If they pushed this to a full Fulton County courtroom hearing, there was a meaningful probability that the judge would not only uphold the current support order, but strengthen it, review the full financial picture, add additional provisions. I sat in that conference room and looked at the abstract art on the wall. I thought about Rebecca Owens at 8 a.m. saying like a submarine. I thought, yeah, pretty much. The door opened. Pratt walked back in alone. He sat down. He looked at his portfolio for a moment, the gesture of a man buying himself 2 seconds to compose a transition. Then he began packing his briefcase, not dramatically, efficiently, the way professionals pack up when the meeting has concluded, and further conversation would be billable time with no viable return. He snapped the briefcase closed, stood, nodded at me with the crisp neutrality of a man whose job had just become significantly shorter. He left without another word. Nancy came back in and sat down. The armor was still on, but something underneath it had shifted, a structural thing, like a building that looks intact from the outside but has quietly lost something load-bearing in the interior. She looked at me across the mahogany table, the Buckhead conference room, the marble lobby downstairs, the $450 an hour afternoon that had just ended with her attorney packing his briefcase and walking out. And she didn't say anything. Neither did I. There wasn't anything left to say in that room. The wall had held. The submarine hadn't leaked a drop. I picked up my folder, stood, put my chair back exactly where I found it, drove back home. 3 weeks later, on the first Friday of the month, Georgia's automatic income shares system reached into Nancy Froman's bank account, with the indifferent mechanical precision of a system that genuinely does not care about anyone's feelings, and drafted $2,500. No warning, no negotiation, no courtesy call, just math. I know this because Rebecca called me that afternoon to confirm the first transfer had processed without incident. I was in the middle of a county water system site review off Mansell Road, standing in the cold in my work jacket, and I looked at my phone screen and felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Something quieter. The specific exhausted relief of a number that finally reflects reality instead of performance. I put my phone back in my pocket and went back to reviewing the water main specs. Some victories don't need a ceremony. They just need a Friday. But here's what I didn't know yet. A woman who has just watched her buckhead attorney pack his briefcase and walk out, who has just felt $2,500 leave her account on a Friday morning, without her permission, who is sitting in a smaller apartment than she planned on with a Mercedes lease she can't comfortably afford anymore. That woman doesn't stop moving. She just changes her approach. And what Nancy tried next, I genuinely did not see coming. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments and also let me know where you're watching from. And hit the like button while you're at it. It was a Tuesday evening in January. Cold, steady Georgia rain. The kind that doesn't announce itself dramatically, just settles in around 4 p.m. and commits to making everything gray and damp and slightly miserable until further notice. I had the stove going. Shrimp and grits. Marcy had asked for it twice in the past week, and I had learned a long time ago that when your 13-year-old daughter voluntarily requests something you cook, you make it without being asked twice. David was at the dining table with his geometry homework spread in 3 directions, pencil behind his ear, doing the thing teenagers do where they stare at a problem long enough that staring becomes a substitute for solving. Marcy had her earbuds in, working on something for English class, occasionally mouthing words to whatever was playing. Normal Tuesday, quiet apartment, rain on the windows. I remember thinking, this is actually fine. This specific moment right here is actually fine. Then the knock came at 7:15. I knew before I opened the door. I don't know how exactly. Some combination of the timing, the rain, the specific energy of the knock itself. Not aggressive, not casual. The deliberate, measured knock of someone who has been sitting in a car in a parking lot, rehearsing this moment for 20 minutes, and has finally committed to it. I opened the door. Nancy was standing in the January rain. Designer coat slightly damp at the shoulders. Hair not quite right in the way that suggested she checked it in the rearview mirror and lost the argument. She looked past me immediately, past my shoulder, into the apartment at the kids at the table. David looked up from his geometry. Went completely still. Marcy pulled one earbud out. Nancy looked back at me, and in her eyes was something I hadn't seen from her since the early years. Not warmth exactly, but the approximation of it. The performance of vulnerability from a woman who had never needed to perform it before because she had never been this exposed before. "We need to talk," she said. "Please. Just 5 minutes." The rain tapped steadily on the walkway behind her. I looked at my kids, read their faces in one glance. The hope and the dread doing the same ugly tango I'd seen in them since December 14th. The wanting it fixed written plainly on both of them in the specific way of children who understand the truth and still ache for the lie. I stepped back from the door. David. Marcy. I kept my voice even. Rooms. Doors closed. They went. No argument. No dramatics. The doors didn't close all the way. I knew that. I chose not to address it. Some things apparent lets happen. Nancy came in out of the rain. Sat at the kitchen table. The modest one. 4 chairs, nothing like the extended dining room table on Wyndham Crest that seated 10 comfortably. She set her bag on the floor and folded her hands on the tabletop and looked around the apartment with an expression she was working hard to keep neutral. I watched her take inventory of the smaller square footage, the store brand everything, the absence of the life she had furnished on my infrastructure, and I felt nothing in particular about her reaction. That surprised me a little. I turned the stove down to low, pulled out the chair across from her, sat, and waited. She opened with the corporate voice. I recognized it immediately. The senior recruiter register, structured and reasonable, the one designed to make the other party feel like they are participating in a mutual problem-solving session rather than being managed. The child support figure, she explained, was creating an unsustainable financial pressure that was directly impacting her professional performance. If her performance dropped, her income dropped. If her income dropped, nobody benefited. Not her, not Cliff, and most importantly, not David and Marcy. She proposed reducing the monthly draft from $2,500 to $1,000. framed it as a pragmatic restructuring, presented it like a budget proposal in a quarterly review. I listened without moving. She held my silence for about 6 seconds before pivoting. The custody arrangement, she continued, needed to reflect what was genuinely best for the children's emotional development. A 50-50 rotation, week on, week off, standard dual-parent schedule, would give David and Marcy the stability of 2 active households. Children needed both parents equally present. It was about their mental health, their sense of family continuity. She said all of this with genuine maternal conviction wrapped so tightly around the structural reality that 50-50 custody eliminates child support requirements entirely under Georgia's income shares formula. That if I hadn't already reviewed exactly this scenario with Rebecca Owens, I might have spent 30 seconds believing it was actually about the children. I didn't spend 30 seconds believing it. I watched her face while she talked. The slight over-precision of every word. The careful calibration of tone. This was Nancy Froman operating at full professional capacity, doing what she did 40 hours a week, reading a situation, identifying leverage points, applying pressure in the register most likely to produce the desired outcome. She was very good at it. She just happened to be doing it to the wrong man on the wrong Tuesday. Then the third angle arrived. And this one was different. The corporate structure dropped away, not gradually, all at once, the way a practiced performer makes a transition look organic. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I pulled my hand back, quietly, without making it a moment. She pushed forward anyway. Her voice dropped to something softer and more dangerous than anything she'd deployed in the conference room in Buckhead. She talked about Lake Lanier, the long weekends, the cooler full of sweet tea, the way David used to fall asleep in the back seat on the drive home, sunburned and exhausted, and completely content. She talked about the 4th of July cookouts on Wyndham Crest, the early years before the promotions, before Sandra's influence calcified into something toxic, before the corporate world rewired her relationship with money and status and the man sitting across from her right now. The tears came, real ones as far as I could tell, which almost made it worse. I made a mistake, Cliff. Her voice was raw in a way I hadn't heard since the wedding venue coat closet. The corporate stress, it got into everything. That sandwich day, I was just overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking. You know who I really am. You've always known. She leaned forward. Let's work this thing out. We can start over. We can fix this marriage. For the children, please. Think about what you're doing to David and Marcy. Look at how they're living here. A gesture around the apartment, subtle, but deliberate. They don't deserve this. We built something on Wyndham Crest. 17 years. Cliff, are you really going to let pride burn all of that down? In the bedrooms, behind doors that weren't fully closed, 2 teenagers sat in the dark on their beds, with their hearts in their throats, listening to their mother's voice shift through registers, like a radio scanning for signal. I heard them breathing. I let her finish. Let the last word land. Let the silence expand to 5 full seconds. The specific silence of a man who is not searching for what to say, but deciding exactly how precisely to place what he already knows. Then I spoke. Nancy, just her name first. Flat and clear. You aren't here because you missed the kids. I kept my voice completely even. Municipal project manager. Site review. Here are the facts as documented. If you missed them, you would have shown up to David's scrimmage last Tuesday, or called Marcy after her math midterm. I let that sit for exactly 1 beat. You didn't do either of those things, I know, because they would have told me, and they didn't tell me, because there was nothing to tell. She opened her mouth. I wasn't finished. You're here because for the first time in 17 years, you opened your banking app on a Friday morning and saw an account balance that didn't have my infrastructure holding it up, and it scared you. That's what's sitting at this table right now. Not regret. Not Lake Lanier. Fear of your own overhead. Her jaw tightened. The third mask flickered. I leaned forward. You want 50-50 custody to stop the support draft. That's the math and we both know it. But I pulled your LinkedIn profile last week. I watched her face. You just accepted a new regional recruiting territory. Charlotte 3 days a week, minimum. New business dinners. Extended travel. Congratulations. It looked like a significant expansion. I folded my hands on the table. So tell me, Nancy, who is watching David and Marcy while you're running a regional territory from a hotel in Charlotte? Your mother. Sandra, who spent December 14th screaming in my kitchen about what a coward I was. You want to tell a Fulton County family court judge That Sandra from Smyrna is your childcare plan? The corporate mask was gone. The vulnerable mask was gone. What was left was just Nancy, tired, exposed, and completely out of angles. You didn't care about this family, I told her, my voice level and cold. Not during all those years when you treated me like furniture, and certainly not tonight. You care about your overhead, and the negotiation is over. Pay the support on Friday, or Rebecca files a contempt motion on Monday morning. Those are the only two choices left on your plate. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and final. Then the hallway door opened. Marcy came out first. She was in her socks, arms crossed over her hoodie, eyes red from listening, but her chin carrying the specific angle she'd had since the birthday kitchen. The one that looked more like me than she probably knew. She stopped at the edge of the kitchen and looked at her mother, not with anger. Something more final than anger. David came around the corner 12 seconds later. He leaned against the hallway wall with his arms folded, unconsciously, completely naturally, in exactly the posture I default to when I'm done talking and done moving. And he looked at Nancy with 16 years of reevaluated memory sitting plainly on his face. Neither of them spoke immediately. They didn't need to. The fact that they were standing in the kitchen doorway and not at their mother's side said every single thing that needed to be said in that apartment on that Tuesday evening. Nancy looked at her children, really looked at them, without the performance, without the platinum card, without the corporate framing or the Sandra-approved narrative of who was carrying this family and who wasn't. She looked at them the way you look at something you've been explaining wrong for years and have just now, too late, read the actual instructions. David spoke first, quiet, steady, his father's register completely unconscious. "Mom," he said, "we're okay here." Marcy didn't say a word. She walked to my side and stood there, just stood there. 3 feet of 13-year-old girl standing next to her father in a modest kitchen in an apartment on Kimblebridge Road. No platinum card. No designer dress, no Whole Foods haul, just a choice, stated clearly, without drama. Nancy looked at the three of us, the man she called an anchor standing at his modest stove, his daughter at his left side, his son in the doorway with his father's posture and his father's eyes. And something moved across her face through several expressions too fast to name before settling into something I recognized. The specific, devastating look of a person who has finally fully understood what they had, and what they did with it. She picked up her bag from the floor, stood, buttoned her coat slowly, each button, methodical, the gesture of a woman buying herself the last few seconds of composure she had available. She looked at me one final time. I held her gaze without heat, without cruelty, without victory, just steady, just done. She walked to the door, opened it. The January rain was still falling outside, same as when she arrived, indifferent and relentless, the way consequences tend to be. She walked out into it. I closed the door. I stood in the entryway for a moment. Then from somewhere below, the parking lot 4 floors down, Sandra's voice broke through the rain like a car alarm nobody asked for. Sharp. Carrying. The voice of a woman who had been sitting in the passenger seat of that white Mercedes GLE for the better part of an hour working herself into a full head of steam and had finally decided the parking lot was her stage. Clifford Froman. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course. She drove up from Smyrna for this. Of course she did. Her voice ricocheted off the parking lot concrete in the neighboring building and came straight up through the window like she'd aimed it personally. You are a monster. You hear me? A thief. You ruined my daughter's life and you are standing up there acting like you are some kind of hero. David moved first. He crossed the living room in 4 steps. Not fast, not dramatic. The deliberate walk of a teenager who has made a quiet, permanent decision. He stopped at the window, looked down at the parking lot below, at his grandmother standing in the January rain beside the white Mercedes GLE 450, the car that had once represented everything he thought success looked like. The luxury, the status, the effortless, consequence-free wealth he used to measure his father against and find his father lacking. He looked at it for a long moment. Sandra's voice kept climbing from the parking lot. He poisoned those children against their own mother. He is a vindictive, bitter little man who couldn't handle a successful woman, and decided to destroy her. David reached up, and pulled the blinds shut. Clean, deliberate, final. The parking lot noise dropped to a muffled, distant thing. Still out there, still going, but belonging to a world that was no longer inside these walls. He turned away from the window and looked at me with an expression that was older than 16 and calmer than anything I deserved from him after the year we'd had. "Dad," he said, "dinner's getting cold. Let's eat." I stood there for a second. I don't have the right words for what that moment felt like. I'm not sure the right words exist. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down. And something in me, the part that had been held at full tension since a Wednesday night in November, since a Buckhead conference room, since December 14th, since 7 years of Sunday dinners where I passed the bread and said nothing, finally, completely, let go. My hands were trembling slightly on the tabletop. Not from anger, not from fear, from the specific cellular exhaustion of a man who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time, and has just now, in a modest apartment on Kimball Bridge Road in the rain, set it down. David saw it. Kids see everything you think they don't. Marcy saw it too. I looked at both of them. My 16-year-old son who had just shut a blind on the life he used to want. My 13-year-old daughter who had stood at my side in a kitchen without being asked. And I said the thing that had been sitting in my chest since December 14th. I'm sorry. They both looked at me. I'm sorry I brought this war to you guys. You didn't ask for any of it. You shouldn't have had to stand in that birthday kitchen. You shouldn't have had to sit in those rooms tonight listening through a door. I looked at the table. I made the right call. I know I made the right call, but it cost you both something you didn't deserve to lose, and I'm sorry for that. The apartment was completely quiet. Sandra's voice had faded to nothing outside. The rain kept falling. The shrimp and grits sat warm on the stove, patient and unhurried, waiting. David pulled out the chair next to me and sat down, not across the table, next to me. The way you sit next to someone when you want them to know you're not going anywhere. "Dad," he said quietly, "you didn't bring the war to us. She did. You just finally fought back." Marcy didn't say anything. She went to the stove, picked up the pot, carried it to the table with the focused, careful energy of a 13-year-old who has decided that actions are more useful than words right now. She served 3 bowls, set one in front of me, set one in front of her brother, sat down with her own. She picked up her spoon, looked at me. "It's good, Dad," she said simply. "You always make it good." We sat there, the 3 of us, in the small kitchen of the apartment that would never make anyone's highlight reel. No catered spread. No custom birthday cake with anyone's face on it. No platinum card. No design or anything. No performance. No audience, no Instagram caption that could capture it even if we'd wanted one. Just 3 bowls of shrimp and grits on a Tuesday night in January, while the rain came down on Kimball Bridge Road, and Sandra's Mercedes pulled out of the parking lot below and drove back toward Smyrna and took 17 years of noise with it. David went back to his geometry between bites. Marcy hummed something quietly. The choir showcase piece, I realized. The one I'd heard from the back row in Johns Creek, while she gave me the look and I moved 4 rows back without being asked. She was humming it now, in our kitchen, without the look. I ate my dinner. I thought about a zero-balance receipt folded inside a wedding card at a venue on Old Milton Parkway. I thought about a kitchen table on Wyndham Crest where a woman signed a mortgage deed and called me her safe place. I thought about a sandwich, a plate, a refrigerator door closed with a hip. I thought about David pulling those blinds shut, and I thought, maybe the most righteous thing I ever did wasn't the birthday presentation. Maybe it wasn't the legal filings or the escrow account or the Rebecca Owens submarine. Maybe the most righteous thing I ever did was refuse to let my children spend the rest of their lives learning how to be what their mother had become. Entitled, hollow, measuring every person they met against a credit limit. They still missed the big house. They still missed the Whole Foods halls, and the bedroom with the window seat, and the effortless, frictionless wealth of a life where someone else absorbed all the real costs. That was okay. Missing things is human. Grieving what was is honest. But they were here, at this table, in this kitchen, with me. And they knew the truth now, about the wire transfer, about the deed, about the man who drove them down to school every single morning, not because he had nowhere better to be, but because there was nowhere on earth he would rather have been. They knew. And knowing was the foundation that nothing, not Nancy's corporate armor, not Sandra's parking lot opera, not a Buckhead attorney with a mahogany table and a $400 billing rate, could touch. The bill had come due, every last cent of it, and we were still here. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you in the next story. Thanks for being here.